With me today on the Agents to Owners podcast, it is my pleasure to have Jessica Fukuchi, president of PCRG Insurance, headquartered in beautiful Bellevue, Washington. Jessica started PCRG in 2016, and they have a very unique niche with partnering with financial professionals to target high net worth clients. With Jessica's was gracious enough to thoroughly go through her process with me, which I was very appreciative of. And I'm looking forward to doing a little deeper dive into that today. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I was able to meet Jessica at the most recent innovation conference where she presented on her topic of targeting high net worth clients, which was, to me, it kind of blew my mind. And of course, it's one of those things you go, why didn't I think of that 20 years ago? And, because that is where I get some of my best personal lines clients. So to her to have a direct market was so exciting to me, and thought she would just be a great guest on our program. So to start, why don't you just go back from the beginning and tell us about your insurance background up until now?
Yeah, so like many people that get into the industry, I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to be an insurance agent, but I did get in really young. I was 19, 18 actually when I first got into insurance, and I've sat in every role in an agency. So I started out as a CSR in a captive agency, and then quickly decided that I wanted to have my own agency, launched the captive agency, had that for a few years, moved into a agency sales director position. And then at that point decided that I didn't want to continue. I wanted to stay in insurance, but I did not want to continue on the captive route. That just wasn't the right fit for me. And so I walked away from a large income, and I didn't have a job. I just resigned, and knew that I was going to make it work. Right. So walked away from it and started PCRG Insurance. And that's where we're at now.
So what caused you to walk away from, and as I read your background, and I'll go ahead and name names, you were with American Family. I see. I was a farmer's agent, kind of a similar, and as you and I talked before, I kind of identified that we have some similar paths. So it was kind of interesting to learn. But yeah, what led you to walking away from your large income with American Family and starting your own?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I didn't want to continue staying on the corporate leadership track, and realized that I had a decision to make whether or not I was going to go back and be an agent with American Family, or if I was going to walk away and be my own boss, right? And so American Family did great things for me. Essentially, they gave me my insurance training wheels, and they give you a lot of the support and the technology and whatnot that you don't have on the independent side. But with that, it's more of a business owner with help, whereas you don't really get to call all the shots in the captive world. And I wanted to call all my own shots. I wanted to have complete control of my future. And so that was the leading decision in walking away, was that I just wanted to have a bit more control of my business.
So you started your own, and you started PCRG. How did you get started? Do you belong to a network, or did you set up your own direct appointments?
So I did. Hold on. I had something beeping in the background, so I went and shut that down. Had something going off. So we are part of a network. We are part of PIB, which is Pacific Interstate Insurance Brokers. They're based out of California. Okay. And we have been with them since before we even officially launched PCRG Insurance.
Okay.
So just an idea. We joined them.
What made them a good fit for you, or what attracted you to that network?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It really was their open just their open concept, to be able, what we really needed was access to markets.
Yeah.
And all of the pooled profit sharing and whatnot. So the direct appointments was a big one for us, to be able to, the open infrastructure, being able to get access to markets, but have them directly through us. So at any given point, if we ever decided that we wanted to walk away, we owned those clients, we owned those appointments, and those were ours. That was really appealing to us. And then the pooled profit sharing. And then the other thing that was really appealing and has been a invaluable thing for me is the community. We know that getting into the independent world, you're kind of on your own island, whereas coming from the captive world, you were not, right? You had a community around you. You had a lot of accountability. You had a lot of that. I felt like that was something that I personally needed jumping into this, was the accountability and the community, which came along with joining that aggregator.
Yeah. Looking at your team since 2016, you've built, I think, a large team in a short amount of time. How were you able to grow so quickly?
I think that what we chose to do, which is maybe different than a lot of agencies that are starting scratch, is we reinvested a lot of the revenue that we were into our people, into growth. Not a lot of it was going into, because we are a referral only agency, not a lot of it was going into outside marketing and leads and whatnot. We were reinvesting back into people and back into teams, and we were utilizing like Safeco contracts and their producer loans. And we were heavily leaning on stuff like that and figuring out where we could get those sponsorship funds. And that's kind of how we originally took off in diving into growing a team.
Did you, with your niche market, is that something that you started from the very beginning, or did you just evolve into that, or was that your plan to target those high net worth customers from the very beginning?
Yeah, so it's kind of been a little bit of both. So I knew when we launched PCRG Insurance, which we launched with the intention to support financial planning firms, and that was a big part of our growth model, that those clients were naturally going to come with those partnerships. And so we set up our agency making sure that we had the high net worth appointments and access to be able to support those clients. But has it grown and evolved into something bigger than what I thought it would be? Absolutely. And so it's twofold, right? I knew there was going to be an access that we were going to need it, and we were going to have those clients. But actually now evolving to almost exclusively a high net worth agency on the personal line side, in a short period of time. That's not something I didn't think we would be at this point. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And just as a kind of a side note, in checking you out a little bit for this podcast, in reading I just had some feedback here on your LinkedIn page. Your about section on your LinkedIn page describes what you do better than any other description that I've seen from an agency. It is like how you laid that out says, this is who we are, and there's no question about it. And I think it's just brilliantly done. So if you did that, kudos to you, because I might have you right mind. I mean, really, it just says, this is who we are. It's exact. There's no, we have the best, customer service experience, and we write auto and home. I think it's brilliantly done. So great job on that. Yeah.
I have to go back and read what it says, because I haven't visited it in a while. So I'm hoping you're not going to ask me to say that. So.
No, but it's like I said, it perfectly identifies exactly who you are, which is what that about section should be. So it's well done. So how did you develop this referral network, this financial referral network? Did you already have Did you already have a solid network before you created PCRG, or is it something you just actively recruited along the way?
So I did have a big network prior to PCRG, but it wasn't in the financial planning sector. So when I was a captive agent, I definitely had a large network of, mortgage lenders and real estate agents, and leaned heavily on the real estate side of things. I was early on doing a lot of like new home buyer classes and partnering with that. And then you met my husband. So my husband's a financial advisor, and in discussions of, this is really an underserved market, and this is something that we need to develop out a process to be able to support financial advisors and support the financial planning process in general. That is how PCRG, that's essentially how it got launched. So it was to support that market and to create something that hadn't been created yet to support that market. And so within that, and if you create a process and if you create something unique, and you fulfill a need, then people are going to come, and you're going to find partnerships naturally, and just where your grass is green where you water it. And so I think that just saying that this is who we serve, and this is who we partner with, and this is the process that we've developed for financial advisors, it's grown that market very quickly because we have something that's unique.
Yeah. And from what it seems from kind of reading up on it is that you are a part of their team. Like, you provide value for the financial piece of it. And I'm guessing that's why you've been so successful, because they have these high net worth customers, and as a part of that is protecting their assets. And you are a trusted advisor on that side. And after working with them for a period of time, and they can trust you and know what you provide, you're providing as much value to that financial advisor as they are, helping you by sending you this referral. That's what I got from reading from your information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in an industry that has turned so much to price, it's really important to remember that price is only an issue in the absence of value, right? And I think that creating value for the advisors and letting them know that you are there to support their process, and that our industries really go hand in hand, but that you're really supporting the work that they're already doing for their clients, is an important conversation to be had. And it's really that education piece on the front side. And once it's had, and once our clients have had a really great experience with you, you've either been able to make them look good, free up the funds, many different things, then it really solidifies that relationship and building, integrating them within their team and their process and whatnot.
Yeah. Coming back to your team and the growth of your team, and I think that you mentioned in one of your previous conversations that your team is 100% remote. Is that? Yep. For me, I would think I would perceive that as being challenging. Tell me what it's like to have a 100% remote team to work with, and maybe some challenges that come along with it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I don't really have many challenges. And that is, I think that's just because of my personality. That is a huge reason from a recruiting and a growth standpoint.
Yeah.
That's just something that we've chosen to lean on as a value add when we're recruiting new raw talent into the industry, is the flexibility and the work from home component. We were actually doing remote before COVID, and before remote became a really big thing. And so it was I like to say we're doing it, and we're doing it well. And because of that, it's just a recruiting tool for us. And I mean, I guess the biggest challenge that I would say is just that lack of community is constantly trying to keep your team engaged.
Yeah.
And I mean, as long as you have the ability and the technology and the items to be able to keep them connected, then you can still do it. But that's probably my biggest challenge, is just making sure that, our team has a friendship and has community to talk from being several states away from each other. But you know what? The fun part is that, like, my team, when we get together and have retreats, but if they are visiting another state that another member of our team is in, like, they're getting together and, they want to see these people in person because and hang out with them when they're there. So usually when I see, someone drive through Utah where I have, several team members and whatnot, they'll get together and meet up with the person so that's fun.
Yeah. And that means that there is a camaraderie there, and that they do like each other, which I think you would really need the right people, for that to be able to pull off correctly. And then looking at your website, do you have a VA that you work with?
I do.
So I'm guessing being 100% remote, that made that process of onboarding a VA that much easier.
Yeah, it was a pretty seamless process. I'm hoping to bring another one on, in the short interim, and but we have a training was always something, being remote, that we knew we had to have, like, an online training library and whatnot. And so we do have that my service team has built out, which has made it a lot easier to onboard regardless of location. But yeah, it was a pretty seamless process. We actually don't use like a VA service. We hired direct. And so there was no training that came as a support of using one of the VA agencies that there are.
Yeah. What kind of work do you have your VA doing for you?
Yeah, so he does pretty much everything that is non-client facing. So he's doing any mortgage verifications, mortgage calls, he'll send past due notices and past due, all of our billing, just notifications, assignments out. He kind of handles all of the assignments within the agency. So if there is logging in, if there's an agency notification, assigning it to the correct service person or the correct agent, and really just making sure that all of those are getting done. He handles a lot of our EOIs, our requests there. So anything that is non-client facing, he's doing. He's not licensed, so he's not handling any policy changes or client interactions, anything like that. But anything that he can pretty much legally do, not being licensed, he's handling.
Yeah. You mentioned tech before. What kind of tech are you using in your agency?
Oh gosh, we have a lot of tech, being a remote agency. So we actually use an automation consultant, Casey Nelson. We've used them for a while, and he's really transformed the tech of our agency. I think when you launch an agency, especially on the independent side, there's a lot of things that you don't realize that the captive side managed for you.
Yeah.
Right? Tech being one of them. Tech being something that I really don't enjoy doing. I don't enjoy building out automation, click here, this happens, click there, that happens. And I started to try to learn it, and I was like, this is the aspect that is making me not excited to wake up and come and be an agency anymore, because I'm doing something that has nothing related to insurance, but is related to owning a business, but I hate it. And so hiring out the things that are making, so all of our technology, that's probably a better question for him, because I really just tell him, this is what I want to happen. And then he tells me how we can make it happen. I'm really good at having a lot of different ideas of how to do all of that, but the actual implementation of all the cool things that we do is 100% on him.
Yeah, good. Well, that's outstanding, right? And that's what we should be doing is hire out things that are not our strengths. So that I'm not that smart, and I like to try and figure things out, and and I do that, but you get to the point where you're at your wit's end and you just can't get it done, and support isn't maybe what it should be. So you're going to have to, well, like our CRM, for example, you want it to do so many things, communicate, whether it's cross sell or, your review messages, and it just doesn't seem to work. And ultimately, I wasted a lot of time and energy when I should have just outsourced from the beginning. So I think that's very smart on your part.
Well, I was done when I had a Merry Christmas message go out in July to my entire client base based off of like one wrong enrollment. It actually ended up bringing in a lot of business, but it was like, I'm going to be done right now.
You know what? That probably generated a lot of response, right?
It did. So probably more than any other messages that we've ever gotten back. I'm sure if I were to go back, if I even knew how to go back and track the response rate, I bet that's near the top.
Yeah. I think I was listening to the Insurance Guys podcast recently, and I think there might have been an agent that they used that as a strategy to send out a birthday wish like 6 months prior to their birth date, and they got an incredible response, and then ended up basically, it was intentional, and a cross sell on other stuff. And it's brilliant. So that's hilarious. So are you using like Microsoft Teams or Slack or something for your team to stay connected? Or
no, we just use the like Google Enterprise,
okay.
Google for your business. And so within that we use their technology just for chat. So we use Agency Zoom. That is the technology platform that we run a lot of our pipeline and a lot of our automation, everything through. I'm actually in the process of integrating our entire service platform over to Agency Zoom. Currently, we run off of what's called Sorted, and that is the service technology platform that we're currently using.
Okay. Tell me about some of the mistakes that you made along the way through your agency. We've all made them, and you almost have to, and that's how you learn. But what are some that you've made in your career?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say that the biggest mistake that I made was early on, not even early on, for the first few years, right? Was I'm a very system process driven person, and that our agency is ran that way. But I focused really heavily on the growth component of the agency. And now the biggest mistake is that I'm trying to now come in and focus really heavily on the entire client experience, what that looks like from not just the growth, but from the servicing side and every touch in the entire experience. And I wish I would have focused on that whole, what does the experience and the life cycle of the client look like? As you get into, I like to call it with my team, like 3-year rewrite hell. Because it seems like every 3 years you have to rewrite like so much of your book. And I wish I would have had the processes and systems in place, not just to focus on growth, but because it's hard. And it's been hard on my service team because they've had to, a lot of people don't like change, and they've had to experience a really heavy amount of change in a short period of time, because instead of gradually kind of evolving to it, it was like, hey, we've got to make some changes, and we've got to make big changes quickly, because me as a leader, I did not heavily address that early on in the when I was developing everything else out.
Yeah, exact same for me. And probably how many of us, right? 90 some percent. But that's how our mind operates, right? I mean, that we're all going to be in growth mode. You have to be, but I neglected the process side of things much longer than most. And now that's what I'm spending most of my time on.
Yeah. And I think that it's really unique to, our industry and, a few others, but there's not very many industries that are so residual based, right? Yeah. And so if you're reading and you're looking into any business coaching, or if you're looking into any everything is really focused on, if you got the client, if you got the growth, right? That's the key factor. But because we're in a unique residual based industry, we have to focus on the front door and the back door, right? Making sure that they're not walking in and leaving. Whereas a lot of industries, you look at it from like a real estate agent and a mortgage lender, essentially they're always in growth mode, right? And we can't utilize the same strategies for our businesses as a lot of the counterparts and referral partners that we're using, because it's totally different. And I think that that's what I did, is I leaned heavily on a lot of these business people that I respected and whatnot, and they're doing it right for their industry. But ours is so unique because of that residual side, right? They're not going to stay if we're not doing our job on the servicing side.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned, as far as a team pain point of having to take on these processes at one time, I am guilty of that too. And of course I learned that's not a great idea to introduce too many different things at one time. I think it was maybe, I don't know, 2018 or 2019. And when I figured all these things, we need a CRM, we need this, we need that. And I said, I'm just going to throw it all in there.
Yeah.
Well, your team's going to kind of revolt, a little bit, or it's everybody likes how they've been doing it for the last, 10 years, which doesn't make it right. So that was painful. So just be careful not to introduce too many things at one time.
Yeah, no, I definitely learned that. And I think I have a really high change threshold for myself. Yeah. And so I have to be cognizant as to like because I have had my team do exactly that, revolt, push back. And, I've had to say like, okay, these are the things that I want to do, but what's a realistic timeline? Because I really could snap my fingers and have it all changed from an actual system point, but from an implementation and having them buy in and having them do it, it probably would never happen, because if all of it was to launch at the same time. So I've been trying to scale back and launch a new program, give it some time, even though my inner self is like, come on, let's go. Yeah. And pull back and let that one get up and running, and then before launching a new one. So that's another mistake that I've made is launching things too fast and expecting my team to just always be right on board, and it's not that way.
Yeah, you learn that if it's not going to get implemented, you're wasting your money. And this, as I've learned, and after going through these, to these conferences a couple times and looking at the shiny objects and saying, yeah, I can see the benefit in that. For the perfect example, this year, I really wanted to take a look at Glovebox.
Oh, me too.
And I'm interested in it, and I wanted to take a demo, but I almost kind of wanted to tell them, I know that I'm not ready for it yet. I have to have a process in place for this, of introducing it to the team, and this is how we're going to use it, or I just can't buy it. So that's what I did.
I'm guilty of doing that, is where I buy it, we get technology and then we have it for months and you haven't done anything with it, and you either cancel or whatnot. So I actually had a demo with Glovebox as well, and I think it's definitely something we want to integrate into the agency. But I had to have that exact same conversation with them of like, I want to do this, but I want to be ready for this.
Yeah.
And because if not, I'm just going to be, flushing money down the toilet every single month, because I'm going to have it and not have the infrastructure in place to be able to do it justice.
Yeah. What are there things that you would say were more challenging than you expected of owning your own business or having your own agency?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just something. I mean, I remember the very first drinking from a waterfall moment, which wasn't even that big, but it just was that one of those very much wow, being on the captive side, like they handle so much for you, not just your technology and not just your website and your accounting and your taxes and your commissions and all of that. But I remember we had just set up all of these appointments and they were like, well, we need your Ivan's number. And I was like, what is an Ivan's number? Like, and that's when I was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff on the backside of an agency, of an independent agency that I don't know yet because it was all done for me. Right. I thought coming out, I was like, yeah, I know how to write insurance. I did not know how to run a business when I launched PCRG insurance. And so, I mean, I think probably the biggest challenge for me now that we're several years in and, I've learned what an Ivan's number is and got all that connected, but is accounting. I think understanding how to do your commissions, do your accounting, do all of that, and to structure. And then the other thing would be how to, structure compensation and all of that for your team. I'm constantly struggling with that. Just in growing pains.
Yeah. There are so many things which you can't, again, many have said there's just not a playbook for, and that's a lot of small business owners, but, for what we do. And on the independent side, there are so many nuances and so many moving parts, which is really, that is the purpose of this podcast, because I've learned everything the hard way, I think. And part of that is a lot of that is my own fault for not seeking out the answers. One of my other issues is that when I took over, I was driven and I worked hard but I wasn't a student of being a business owner, and I didn't look out for a lot of these answers. I'm just like, I know, I know how to manage people and I can read people pretty well. And I was confident in my ability to handle most anything, but you don't realize all the pieces of it. It's hilarious that you say Ivan's, because that's got to be one that most of us were like, what is Ivan? You would never know. And to your point of, going back to having a network, I think that makes perfect sense to have a little bit of background, or, to have a little bit of support to go back to, for those. I'm really surprised at the number of scratch agents that I've been interviewing. There's been very few that have had a network, which really surprised me, because they've gotten their direct appointment, which is, again, they're flying alone. They're without having that network to bounce off of, or a lot of times even markets.
I wonder that too. And especially now, right? Like we've seen it in the last year where carriers are coming in and they're wanting to limit the amount of agencies that they're working with, and they want to limit growth and whatnot, and especially in certain states. And so it is interesting. I'm like, how are I don't know. I'm glad I'm not entering right now.
Yeah.
Because not having an aggregator, because I don't know how you would even approach and get an appointment right now. Without having some sort of person hand walking your resume essentially to the person that you need to be talking to and vetting you and advocating for you that you're the real deal.
Especially right now, like I'm thinking of, in 2023, I'm looking at taking on potentially another market, and maybe consolidating, offering up one of our, a couple of our smaller books, to maybe, kick that off. But I'm thinking, how can they I can see where they're going to be reluctant. Everybody's unprofitable and there's so much uncertainty. So how could you possibly give a new agent a market when we're struggling with profitability right now? We have nothing to go off of.
Yeah.
That you have.
No, and I'm even seeing it with our very tenured Oregon Mutual book. Obviously Oregon Mutual is exiting, and prior to a year ago, I would have had carriers fighting to do a book roll of that. And now, I mean, great loss ratios, really tenured book of business. And I can't, at this point, I can't get another carrier to want to do a book roll because they're just saying, we're just not wanting to grow that much, right? It's great. Ask us a year ago, ask us in a year from now, our appetite may change. But right now, it is such a unique time to be in the industry and to be getting in even more, because you're going to be focusing on growth when your carriers are not.
Yeah. Wow, great point.
That's a really tough time.
Yeah. What advice would you have for a scratch agency or a newer agency?
Yeah. I think getting in, always remembering that every person was once a beginner. Every expert was once a beginner in all those categories. I think it's really easy to get in and say, I need to get on all of these systems and I need to run it just like the way that, my peers and the people that I see and meet at these conferences are running it and do the things that they're doing. And it's okay to come in and do it completely different.
Yeah.
And that's worked for me, right? Yeah. Coming in and breaking the mold a little bit and integrating different processes and different systems that are outside. There's so many ways to be successful in this business. So don't be afraid to do something that's outside of the box.
Yeah. Great advice.
Probably, my biggest, and then I would always say, just kind of like what we talked about earlier, my biggest mistake was not looking at the entire process. And so for any new agent getting in, looking at the entire client experience and not just focusing on growth for your first 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And so that has been the common thread with everybody that I've talked to so far, which is either the advice or the mistake, which is to not focus on and develop processes early. So for any scratch agents listening, it's been said time and time again, work on the processes now, and it's way easier to work on it now, before you have that big client base than it is to do it afterwards, like we're doing right now.
Yeah. So, no, my phrase, and I say it to my team and whatnot, it's way easier to turn a canoe than it is the Titanic, right? And so if you develop out those processes and systems early on, it's way easier to even change them when you need to than to try to implement something when you have an entire book of business to manage as well. And you have staff that you're managing, and you're trying to get buy-in not only from your staff, but from your clients. It's hard for me right now to get my clients to transition more to a service model that is online, and my clients still want to call and want to talk on the phone and want to, and so it's not just training your people and having them make the changes, but once you get your people to buy in, then you gotta, so that's the Titanic, right? That's shifting the entire feel of your agency, and that's hard.
Yeah. And like to your point of, which is what we've been working on too, is training your customers. This is how we'd like to do business now, and not just, or if you can do that from the very beginning, this is how you submit your service request.
Yeah. It's hard to, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I certainly have. Like, there have been clients that we've either had to say goodbye to or that we've lost because we've had to stay strict in wanting to say, like, this is how we're going to be a streamlined machine, and this is how we're going to be able to grow. And that's just not the service model that some of our clients want. And it sucks sometimes to lose a client because you're not willing to continue to service those policies the way that you always have. Right. And you can talk to an agency that was a high cash agency, right? And they took cash payments. And I know there's a lot out there that they accepted cash and they got away from it, and they lost a good amount of clients that, are your clients that came in and whatnot. So, I mean, that is a pain point of making that shift and retraining your clients, that if you set up your agency standards in the beginning of what type of clients you take on and how you service them, it's a lot less painful to say no and lose them when you decide to change it 5 years in.
Yeah, agreed. I think a good example of that is I mentioned that we're moving our office space just down the hall, and we're going to have, part of our model is going to be, it's going to be more for our staff, is more of a hybrid model. Half will be in the office, half will be at home, and we don't really get any or very few customer visits, maybe 3 a month or something, and even those they're of course they're not necessary. You didn't need to drive up here to drop off the VIN number of the car that you just got. It's just how some people operate. I mentioned to Brian in my office just the other day, and I said, do we just lock our door at the new space? And he just started laughing, which is really foreign, which, for somebody like you who's 100%, you've never dealt with anything like that. But when you have a customer base that was common to just stop by, and that's really, we've gotten away from that so much. But to say no.
And one thing I do deal with that's similar to that, right? And specifically in the last month or so, which has been, we get clients that don't want to work with a remote agency. Even if they don't want to come in the office, we do lose clients for being a remote only agency. So I will say that because we don't have a brick and mortar, and there are clients that just say, I just want to be able to come in and speak to somebody face to face if I can. And, we have to be okay with saying, then we're not going to be the agency for you. This is not going to be a good fit for you long term. And so yeah, you mean being remote has its challenges when you do have clients that want, even if they're not going to come in and visit you, they want the option to, if they decide they want to bring their VIN number in person. They don't have that option, and that's just not okay with some people. And we have to be okay with knowing that those are just not our people that we are going to insure in our agency.
Which is the exact same conversation that I had with my staff to say is that, but that's not how we operate anymore. And if we lose, look, everybody, if my dad can learn to text, people can use to call, can figure out how to call and give their VIN number or, do whatever it is. So, and that was the one positive that came out of COVID, was to kind of enhance a lot of that things. And we took full advantage. That's when we said, we're no longer accepted. We're getting rid of our sweep account. We no longer need it. We take no more payments in the office. And really kind of, so that was a big help in that. But yeah, it's interesting for, like I said, to have this conversation, and it is kind of hard, I think, with my staff person. And I said, like, he was like, we're going to turn business away just based on that. Like, well, yeah, I mean, we have to do business how we're going to do business. Ultimately, we're not talking about a lot. And most times, if they trust us, they like us, they're going to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
So great. Hey, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you so much for sharing some time with me today. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing wrapped up. Thank you to everyone else for listening to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. Oh, before I do that, Jessica, in case anybody wants to get in touch with you and maybe learn a little bit more about how you target your high net worth customers or anything that you do, how can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, email's probably the most responsive through that. So just Jessica at PCRGinsurance.com.
Okay, I will leave that in the show notes. And again, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun, as I expected. And for everyone else, we will see you next time.
Thank you. I had a blast.